We've all seen the statues. We've seen the marble busts in fancy libraries where this guy looks like he's about to explode from a headache. Ludwig van Beethoven. People treat him like this delicate, sacred figure of high culture. But let's get one thing straight right out of the gate. This guy was the original punk rocker. He didn't just write music. He grabbed the 18th century by the throat and shook it until the wig fell off. He was messy, he was loud, he was perpetually ticked off, and he changed the world while literally being unable to hear a single note of his own masterpieces. But before we get to the genius part, we have to talk about where this madness started. Beethoven was born in 1770 in Bonn, Germany, and his childhood? It was a total nightmare. His dad, Johann, was a local tenor and a world-class alcoholic who had a massive case of prodigy envy. He saw what Mozart's dad was doing, touring the kid around Europe, collecting bags of gold and basically retiring early, and he thought, hey, I can do that. I just need to bully my son into being a miracle. So imagine you're 4 years old. You should be worried about coloring or trying not to eat dirt. Instead, your dad comes home from the pub at 3 a.m, reeks of cheap wine, drags you out of bed by your ears, and stands over you while you play scales until your fingers bleed. If the kid made a mistake, he got cuffed upside the head. This went on for years. The guy literally lied about Ludwig's age, telling everyone he was 2 years younger just to make him seem more miraculous. Can you imagine the therapy bills this kid would have today? Yeah, doc, my dad used to make me perform for his drinking buddies at 2 a.m. while I was still in my pajamas. It's a miracle the kid didn't grow up to hate music and become a professional woodchopper. But here's the kicker. Ludwig was actually that good. By the time he was a teenager, he realized Bonn was a dead end. He headed to Vienna, which was the Silicon Valley of music. If you wanted to be a player, you went to Vienna to impress the guys in the bigwigs. He meets Mozart briefly, and Mozart basically tells everyone, keep an eye on this kid, he's gonna give the world something to talk about. And he did. But Beethoven didn't play the servant game. Back then, musicians were basically high-end chefs. You wore a uniform, you bowed to the prince, and you played whatever nice music they wanted for their dinner parties. Beethoven? Not a chance. He'd walk into a palace looking like he just slept under a bridge, sit at the piano, and play so aggressively that people would cry. And if they started talking while he was playing, he'd just stop. He'd close the piano and walk out. Oh, you want to talk about the weather while I'm pouring my soul out? Fine. Sit in silence, you bunch of phonies. He was the first guy to say, I'm not an employee, I'm an artist. You're lucky to be in the same room as me. Now, let's talk about his day-to-day life, because this is where the luminary mind starts looking like a guy who should be on a reality show. Beethoven was a disaster. He was the messiest human being in history. He moved apartments constantly. I'm talking over 60 times in his life. Why? Because he was a nightmare neighbor. He'd be up all night pounding the keys, pouring buckets of cold water over his head to stay awake, which would then leak through the floor and ruin the neighbor's ceiling. Imagine being the guy living under him. You're trying to sleep for your job at the cobbler shop, and the guy upstairs is literally trying to break the floorboards with a C minor chord while flooding your kitchen. And his coffee? This is a documented fact. The guy was a psycho about his beans. 60 beans, not 59, not 61. He would sit there every morning and count out exactly 60 individual coffee beans for his cup. That focus, that insane, obsessive attention to detail is what made the music what it was. He wasn't just writing tunes, he was architecturing sound. Then right when he's becoming the biggest star in Europe, the floor drops out. In his late 20s, he starts hearing this buzzing, a ringing. He tries to ignore it, but it gets louder. Then the voices start getting muffled. Think about the irony of that. It's like a world-class sniper going blind, or a master chef losing his sense of taste. He's the best in the world, and the one tool he needs to survive is breaking. He was terrified. He stopped going to parties because he didn't want people to realize he couldn't hear them. He thought if the world found out he was going deaf, his career was over. He goes to a place called Heiligenstadt to try and recover in the quiet of the countryside. It doesn't work. He writes this letter to his brothers, the Heiligenstadt Testament, which was basically a suicide note. He's done. He's ready to check out. But then at the last second he decides, no, the art. I haven't put out what's inside me yet. And that is when the heroic period starts. He stops trying to make pretty music for the aristocrats. He starts writing music that sounds like a fistfight. He writes the Third Symphony, the Eroica. Originally, he dedicated it to Napoleon Bonaparte because he thought Napoleon was this great liberator. Then Napoleon declares himself emperor, and Beethoven gets so ticked off that he takes the title page and scratches Napoleon's name off so hard he rips the paper in half. That is the level of pettiness I can respect. Oh, you want to be a tyrant? Fine. Your symphony is cancelled. Then comes the Fifth Symphony. Come on. Even if you live in a cave, you know that. It's 4 notes. That's it. He took 4 notes and built a skyscraper out of them. People at the time didn't know what to do with it. It was too loud, it was too fast, it was too angry. It was the heavy metal of 1808. But as the music got louder, his world got quieter. By the time he's in his 40s, he is stone cold deaf. He's using hearing trumpets that look like giant brass cones, and they don't do a thing. He's sawing the legs off his pianos so he can put the instrument directly on the floorboards, just so he can feel the vibrations in his teeth. Think about the genius required for that. He's not hearing the music, he's feeling the physics of it. He's got the entire map of the orchestra in his head, and he's just trusting the math. And he was still a nightmare to be around. He had this nephew, Carl, and Beethoven decided he was going to be the perfect father figure. He spent years in court fighting his sister-in-law for custody. He called her the queen of the night, and not in a nice way. He gets the kid, and then he's so overbearing and paranoid that the poor kid eventually tries to end his own life just to get away from his uncle's help. It goes to show you, you can be a luminary mind and still be an absolute train wreck of a human being. But all of it, the legal battles, the deafness, the counting beans, it leads to the 9th Symphony. This is the big one, the Ode to Joy. He's totally deaf now. He hasn't heard a human voice in years. He decides to do something that literally no one had ever done, put singers in a symphony. The critics thought he was senile. The old man has lost it. He's putting a choir in a symphony. That's not how it works. Beethoven didn't care. He was writing for the future. The premiere in 1824 is one of the craziest moments in history. Beethoven is on stage conducting, but the orchestra has been told to ignore him and follow a different guy behind his back because Beethoven is waving his arms around out of time. He can't hear the instruments. When the piece ends, the crowd goes absolutely nuclear. They're standing, they're screaming, they're throwing their scarves. And Beethoven? He's still facing the orchestra. He's staring at the sheet music thinking he's a failure because he can't hear any applause. One of the singers has to walk over, grab him by the shoulders, and turn him around so he can see the crowd. That's the moment he realizes he did it. He gave the world a masterpiece he would never actually hear. He died in 1827. And even his death was dramatic. There was a massive thunderstorm over Vienna, and the legend says he woke up, shook his fist at a bolt of lightning, and then checked out. Whether that's true or not, it fits the brand. But here's the lesser-known part. For years, people wondered why he was so sick and so angry. When they analyzed his hair and bones recently, they found massive levels of lead. The guy was literally being poisoned by his own wine and his own doctor's medicine. He was living with lead poisoning for decades. No wonder he was cranky. I'd be screaming at the neighbors too if my brain was being slow-cooked in heavy metals. 30,000 people showed up for his funeral. The schools were closed. The military had to be called in to keep the crowd back. Everyone knew that something fundamental had changed. He had taken music from being something pretty that rich people listened to while they ate cake, and he turned it into a mirror for the human soul. He taught us that you don't need to be perfect to be great. You don't even need to be able to hear to listen to the universe. He was a messy, bean-counting, landlord-fighting, lead-poison genius who refused to quit. So, next time you're frustrated because your Wi-Fi is down or you had a bad day at the office, think about Ludwig. Think about the guy who sat in total silence and wrote the soundtrack for humanity. Beethoven wasn't just a composer. He was the man who broke the rules so we could finally hear the truth.